So I think, one of the first things that I sort of noticed when I was looking through your bio, Sam, is, you've had some interesting experience across theatrical, across production. Do you want to just very quickly give a little summary of sort of how you got to Vimeo
Sure.
and your career thus far?
Absolutely. I started my career in the late 90s doing marketing for major studios, starting with New Line, going to Warner Brothers, doing theatrical marketing for New Line and Warner Brothers. I went to Paramount Home Entertainment to work in the home video market, and from Paramount went to a company called Rhino, which was a specialty label of the Warner Music Group, and focused on niche content marketing, and began in a role of acquisitions, so it was a joint role of marketing acquisitions. From there, went to Fremantle Media, which is obviously based here in London, and worked in their LA office as Vice President of Business Development. And after leaving Fremantle, I joined a company called Gaiam. Gaiam is a lifestyle fitness company known for creating balance balls and yoga videos. In 2011, they decided that it was time to take their brand into the digital era, and with my leadership in the content space, we built Gaiam TV, which is an SVOD channel that boasts over 100,000 subscribers today worldwide. And in 2014, I joined Vimeo.
So just for perhaps the very few people in the room who aren't familiar with Vimeo, what's your elevator? How would you describe Vimeo to someone who isn't familiar with them?
Sure.
And then perhaps we could use that to segue into your assessment of how Vimeo has performed in the marketplace over the previous 12 to 18 months.
Of course. Vimeo is essentially a video sharing platform. I was watching the news the other night, and they were celebrating YouTube's 10th birthday. We turned 10 a couple months ago, so we're a little older than YouTube. They're a little bigger than us. I think that the elevator pitch way I would describe Vimeo versus YouTube is using a very American analogy. YouTube is like Walmart, and Vimeo is like Bloomingdale's. We are where you find your cats on the pianos and interesting pranksters on YouTube. Vimeo has always been the home of quality content, and I think that the reason for that is that we really invested early in our player technology. I think that our player technology is among the best in the world, and filmmakers and people that were very creative gravitated towards the platform that was first to offer HD, the platform that was always innovating and keeping that player technology as crisp and as amazing as possible. I talk to filmmakers, and I don't really know all of the technical details, but they go, "My blacks look so crisp on Vimeo," and I'm like, "Great, that sounds amazing." And that kind of is the differentiator. So the other major thing that makes us different is that we never jumped into the ad-supported model. We have never had pre-roll. We don't have any intention of going to pre-roll. So Vimeo has kind of forged a very different path, whereas as YouTube evolved its monetization strategy, it was all about engaging audience to drive pre-roll advertising and having their creators earn relatively small revenue in the microcosm by participating in that pre-roll revenue on a relatively equal basis. Vimeo has not had advertising and has supported itself by subscription services. In other words, people sign up for Vimeo to be able to showcase their videos. So whether it's the White House or Tesla or an independent filmmaker, having access to storage and tools and having the access to that quality player is worth paying for, and people have been doing that for several years now, and in the hundreds of thousands.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Well, you mentioned hundreds of thousands. I mean, obviously you're in a very competitive space. Can you characterize a little bit about how you feel internally about your commercial performance, your market performance in the previous year? And I guess, another thing which is always interesting about, you guys who are obviously at the leading edge of a very innovative company. I mean, how do you also have a very big backer in IAC. I mean, how do you measure your success internally?
Well, when you look at IAC, they are looking for growth, and Vimeo has been a star player. Our growth trajectory has been through the roof over the last several months, years. I've only been there for 13 months. When I started, I was the 123rd employee. We're now just about 200 people, so we've almost doubled in size since joining the company. I work for the Audience Networks, which is a new division of the company. When I joined Audience, we were 2 people, my general manager and myself, and we are now over 40 people on that team. And our focus is actually a brand new business, which kind of came outside of our tool set. I talked about the subscription business, and we give people that access to store their content and to utilize our services. About 2.5 years ago, the idea was, how do we provide additional value to creators? What is a tool that they could use to monetize more effectively and continue to see value in their subscription? And that was essentially the birth of Vimeo On Demand, the idea of empowering creators to be able to sell the work that they wanted globally through the Vimeo infrastructure, both connected devices as well as the online infrastructure and mobile, et cetera, and give them a revenue share that was unprecedented, 90%, 90-10 split. So for 90 cents out of every dollar of content that they sell on Vimeo comes back into their pocket. Also to give them the freedom of choosing what price to sell it at, how they would sell it, where they would sell it, what territories. Would they rent it? Would they sell it for purchase? Would they be able to download it or stream it only? So unlocking that power, and initially it was built as a tool set, just an open platform tool set for people to use. And it quickly became a multi-million-dollar business, which is why our CEO, Carrie, said, we need to invest here. And that's how the Audience Networks was born, and that's how we have an entire marketing and content acquisitions and operations infrastructure that has been born out of that. My goal is to bring in content from the broader entertainment world to kind of sit alongside the content that comes organically from that open platform.
Right, that's very interesting. So, I mean, given that you're now trying to stamp your identity on the type of content you acquire, I mean, can you talk a little bit more about, what would characterize Vimeo's content catalog? When you're going out there, you have the world of available content, available to you guys to distribute through your service is absolutely vast. From, popular young people in the bedroom, the YouTube streamer model, all the way up to, relatively high-end productions that wouldn't be out of place on HBO. What characterizes a Vimeo show?
Well, I think there's a differentiator between what we would put the name Vimeo Original on and what it is that we acquire, and also what comes in from the open platform. So we have seen success across the board. The best way to describe Vimeo's catalog would be eclectic. But always, I think, again, that quality is truly significant. We have examples of people who are selling bar preparatory courses and making, 6-figure income selling an instructional course. This is an example of an organic piece. One of my favorite stories that really demonstrates the power of Vimeo's platform and the differentiator between what Vimeo is and what an iTunes or an Amazon comes from a film called In the High Country. It's a 40-minute documentary about about high altitude running. So people who go up in the mountains and run. It's a crazy thought, but they do it. The film is 40 minutes long. So the filmmaker came to us after going to iTunes, which he wanted to originally put it on, and they said, well, it's a short, so you can sell it for $1.99. And he said, no, I've invested years of my life. It's a beautiful piece. I spent a lot of money making it, and I know this community of high-altitude runners are interested in this piece of content, and it's worth more than $1.99. Well, that's what we price shorts at, so take it or leave it. He decided to leave it, went to Vimeo, priced it at $15, and again, approached 6-figure revenues in a very short period of time on a short, almost unheard of. Was able to sell it worldwide. So to answer the question about what my team looks for specifically, we're really looking for content that is unique and has a really interesting voice, such as a High Maintenance, which was our first original series. That where the quality comes through, but that also, and I think the fundamental core thing that I look for is passionate audiences. The difference between a Netflix or another subscription service is a show like Transparent, which was one of my favorite shows from last year. would be hard to put on Vimeo, even though it's a tremendous quality, because you would be lifting it from the ground up. You need that element of discovery, right? You need somebody who's actually been able to see it without the barrier of a paywall to then be able to go, oh, this is something you should check out, and it builds momentum and builds audience. High Maintenance, when we funded it, was actually in its second season, and it had already garnered a lot of attention on Vimeo. The creators put it up for free, and they got that engagement and attention, and that kind of gave us a roadmap to say, okay, here's a product that makes sense for a second season.
It's very interesting you mentioned High Maintenance, because obviously that's, I mean, would it be fair to kind of, describe it as, one of the shows which, really put Vimeo on the map in terms of original content production? Of course, High Maintenance just been signed by HBO, which is obviously a fantastic testament to the show's producers. But I mean, do you feel a bit annoyed about that?
No.
Is that like someone coming along and just taking House of Cards off Netflix or something like that? I mean,
look, I think it speaks really to a fundamental difference and really what Vimeo as a brand stands for.
Yeah.
We as a brand have always been about empowering creators.
Yeah.
We give creators the tools to showcase their work in a way that it gets discovered through things like staff picks. So filmmakers put their work on. We have a whole team of curators who do nothing but look at content, trying to find the very best pieces of content from literally millions of clips that exist on Vimeo and elevate that content into the consciousness. When I go over to UTA or CAA or WME to talk about projects, I can't tell you the number of agents who come up to me and say, I found my next star on Vimeo. I found my best director of photography on Vimeo. I saw a staff pick and I picked that guy up and now he's directing feature films. We are almost a college or a proving ground for film professionals, and that is one of the major powers. Empowering that creator is in our DNA, and so when it comes to, I appreciate and look, Netflix is investing a lot more money up front in the content that they're producing. When you look at what we invested in the High Maintenance versus a House of Cards, which is tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, they need to be very protective and very,
they need to own the IP.
That's right. They need to be more traditional.
Sure.
We see ourselves as being very disruptive, and the idea of giving creators that empowerment to say, look, we will invest in you, and you have the choice as to how this path goes. Do you keep going on Vimeo? Do you do something like HBO? In the case of the creators of High Maintenance, they were given that option. We obviously don't feel that they should have done something that we would have forced them into. Like, you're not going to make a happy creator by making them stick around and do...
Okay. I mean, but do you not think perhaps a logical evolution would be to elevate Vimeo to be the type of place where, the High Maintenance could satisfy the next level of ambition, or to start owning your own IP? I mean, if you do really stamp a particularly Vimeo-type identity on a content proposition, would it not be rational to, seek more conventional routes towards the audience, perhaps working with, some of the more traditional television distributors, like we see Netflix on set-top boxes? I mean, how do you guys feel about that?
Sure. Look, I think from a distribution perspective, we are very widely distributed, and we're working clearly with partners like Verizon and Roku and Android to build out that experience. Okay. But as far as owning the intellectual property or putting a lot of parameters around the creators that we work, I think that comes with as every service evolves. If you look at the deals that Netflix did early, for example, with Orange is the New Black, they don't necessarily own that intellectual property. It's owned by I believe Lionsgate has the IP. They are now taking a much different approach. It's every online platform has its own path of evolution. Vimeo is very, very, as I said, very protective of that creative freedom, and we really, really want to do things that are empowering at this juncture, and I don't see that changing dramatically as we go forward.
Okay. So just a little bit more on the content side. So, we talked about High Maintenance. You've been pretty interesting putting some flesh on how you view the business of content acquisition, how you want to make creators feel. Can you talk a little bit about some of perhaps some of the more recent investments in content acquisition you've made that you're particularly excited about? What's your next high maintenance?
Absolutely. Look, there's a difference between how we view originals and exclusive content.
Right.
There are platforms, not to pick on Netflix, but there are shows that were on the BBC 3 years ago that are now all of a sudden Netflix originals in the United States. They really aren't, but they put that branding on it because it's exclusive.
Right.
We do about 6 to 12 exclusive releases every single month.
Okay.
My team is out there actively and aggressively finding content that has audience, that is unique, that has passionate followings, and bringing it to the platform exclusively. That content comes from a very, very wide and diverse range. And again, in the same way that there are millions and millions of clips of video on Vimeo, there are very, very few that are staff-picked. We kind of take the same approach when it comes to originals. There will be dozens and dozens of exclusive, only available on Vimeo pieces of content that come across the next year. But when we pick the next original series, it will be of a quality that is equal to something like high maintenance. And so we're very, very careful with that branding component because it means something to us. It's very, very important. That being said, you asked about some things that we're excited about. I'm particularly excited about the new series Con Man. It's the second highest funded crowd product in history. It did over $3.3 million in Indiegogo in less than 30 days.
Wow.
It's one of the first projects that came out of a really interesting collaboration that we did with Indiegogo. Again, talking about passionate audiences and connecting those passionate audiences with platforms where they can sell and own that direct relationship to consumer. We found that crowdfunding is a perfect match for direct distribution, for direct-to-consumer distribution. So they raised money. We gave them a matching fund to help them finish that project, as well as a significant marketing commitment so that when the project was finished that it would reach a broader audience. They went ahead and crowdfunded 13 episodes, and those episodes will be appearing on Vimeo exclusively in September. So we're really excited about that. Now, this is a series where Alan Tudyk, who is on Joss Whedon's Firefly, has a massive, massive sci-fi fan base, and it's called Con Man because it's a comic take on the Comic-Con world. He plays basically himself, an actor who makes a living going to Comic-Cons and kind of the interesting, quirky, comedic interactions that happen around that experience.
Wow. That'll be interesting. So, I mean, presumably everyone who's participated in the crowdfunding gets to watch it. What's the business model for everyone else?
Well, you have to think that that audience who is crowdfunding, I mean, I believe the average, and don't you want to quote Indiegogo on this, but I think that the average crowdfunder spends $86.
$86?
Yeah, towards something. That's a pretty passionate fan. You have to believe that if, let's say, 45,000 people spent $86 to make that piece of IP, they will have access to it as a part of their crowdfunding. And by the way, we tell people who are funding projects using crowdfunding, don't give away the film for free, or at very least, don't give it away for a low price point. Because obviously, if you have somebody paying that much money, they're going to pay again to own it. So we really encourage people who go into that crowdfunding spectrum to think carefully about what they give away and how they control that. But again, that audience of 45,000 has got to have another 100, 150,000 fans that are like, I'll buy it when it comes out. I'm not ready to make that investment now, but when it's ready to come, I'm willing to invest. It's the idea of the people who line up outside of the record store to pre-buy a CD before it happens, and then they come back to buy it again. But there's a lot more people that come into the store once that CD is available, the kind of less super dedicated fans. So that, 150,000 people buying that title at $15 is a nice piece of business for them and a nice piece of business for us.
That's great. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I mean, just talking kind of about the monetization of your content a little bit. So, you mentioned that you give creators a lot of control over how they sell their content, which is obviously something that's hugely appreciated. You have a subscription tier for your content creators to give them a whole load more tools to distribute and present their shows on your platform. But haven't you been considering a subscription-based model for the consumer side? recently?
Yes.
I mean, is that something that's been implemented yet?
It is not.
Right.
There is the engineers are actually sleeping now, but when they get into the office in New York, they will be busily working away to finish up work on what will be the first iteration, what we call Vimeo SVOD 1.0,
right.
Which, again, without going into details as to kind of the technology, because it hasn't been released, and obviously my PR guys would get upset if I gave you details that I shouldn't. All that to say that when you look at Netflix and you look at Vessel and you look at Amazon and other subscription services, they are typically about a branded subscription of that company.
Yeah.
The first iteration of Vimeo SVOD will not be a Vimeo-wide, Vimeo-branded SVOD. It's again kind of along the theme that we've been talking about for TVOD, finding ways to empower creators to be able to access a marketplace that is burgeoning, but from an enterprise-level solution is super, super expensive and not particularly accessible to creators on a second tier down.
Yeah.
So giving them that empowerment on an SVOD basis is kind of where I think we're going to net out.
Right. So, I mean, would it be fair to characterize the content in that in the SVOD service as you know, a reaction to who wants to be in it, rather than you guys taking a kind of a more curatorial perspective on it?
I would think that initially, yes, though there is that process of educating and finding those folks who should initially be a part of that launch program, which my team is actively involved in trying to figure out how do we connect the technology and the creation of that, or the content that exists or is being created, and merge those together. So that we are playing an active role in figuring out what SVOD will look like.
Okay. Can you give any indications as to how long we're going to have to wait to see this?
I would say by the summer you will see something.
Okay.
So let's say June, July.
Okay, great.